Mr. Grossi is now back from Kursk and at IAEA headquarters in Vienna. Rafael Grossi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, thank you for joining us here on Inside Story. As we've seen, you've just returned from the nuclear plant in Russia. What concerned you most?
Well, what concerns me most is the situation of a nuclear power plant, very close to an active combat zone. In this case, after the recent military activity and the incursion of forces from Ukraine into the territory of the Russian Federation. Now, we have seen the possibility of a nuclear power plant within range of unmanned area vehicles or artillery. And of course, this is always something that, irrespective of the territory, the country, or other circumstances, this is always something that concerns us because it has to do with nuclear safety and security. And this is why I personally led a mission by the IAEA there, which took place yesterday.
Director General, this is an old design of nuclear plants. As I understand it, it's very similar to the one at Chernobyl, which was the scene of that awful nuclear disaster in 1986. My understanding, the technical term is a containment dome, but basically it doesn't have a hardened roof. That's the problem. Just tell us, what is the scenario if something was to hit it, if a missile or drone was to hit the reactor? What would happen?
As you rightly say, most nuclear power plants have their core protected by a metal structure, inner vessel, but then on top of it, a reinforced dome, which is prepared to resist even the impact of an incoming aircraft, to give you an example. In this case, because of the type of design, of course, the reactor is inside the building, but this building is a normal building.
So what would happen, Director General, if it was hit? Would it be like Chernobyl or worse?
If it was hit, there would be, unlike in a normal nuclear reactor, where a hit on the reactor would most probably never get to the core of the reactor with the fuel and the nuclear material is, in this case, it would directly impact it. You must remember that this type of reactor, if you refer back to your memories of Chernobyl, is moderated by graphite, so combustible. And then we could have potentially, I wouldn't use Chernobyl as a parameter, but in terms of the intensity of what could happen, because it would depend on what kind of projectile would be impacting. But in any case, there would be an important radioactive release into the atmosphere. So it really constitutes a very serious situation, again, in case there was an impact of that nature. So this is why it was important for me to go to evaluate the state of the reactor, the emergency and preparedness and response mechanisms in place. And of course, have the possibility to have the IAEA, in case there was such eventuality, which of course we hope would not take place, able to respond to it and to inform the international community about it. So this was a first but indispensable contact with the situation there that I had to make.
Okay. We know that you were shown what the Russians said was drone debris. They say, the Russian Foreign Ministry, that you should be more explicit in condemning the Ukrainians. But how do you know that that really was drone debris from the Ukrainians? And do you have any fears that your visit is being used for Russian propaganda?
Not at all. I mean, intentions by others is not something I would get into, motivations or intentions. Otherwise, I would not be able to do much in the international arena these days. So what's important is what the IAEA does and what the IAEA says. And we see things, we consider them technically, we evaluate. Obviously, at the time of these events, they refer to a couple of occasions recently and as part of the recent military activity, which they attribute to the other side. Of course, we were not present there. We were not able to make an evaluation at the time, so we cannot point fingers. What I have said, and again, what we say is what counts, is that all of this cannot be separated from the events taking place in the area. So this is why it's important that the IEA gets involved, and it's important to reaffirm, as I did yesterday from Kursk or earlier at the United Nations Security Council, there should never be an attack on a nuclear power plant. This is the principle.
And as you know, there's a very worrying symmetry to the situation because the Kursk plant, which is not currently occupied by Ukraine, is in Russia. Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant is at the front line in Ukraine, and that is occupied by Russia. How worried are you at the moment about Zaporizhzhia too?
Well, I will be visiting Zaporizhzhia next week, and hopefully also Kyiv, and talking to President Zelensky, with whom, of course, we have a very important agenda, referring to Zaporizhzhia, referring to the protection of the other nuclear power plants in Ukraine, which at the moment are the lifeline of the country, because they are at a moment where the as you know, energy infrastructure of the country is under stress. These nuclear power plants are providing reliable energy to the economy and to the society. So we are going to be discussing that and other things.
Okay, Director General, given the symmetry that I've talked about, the fact that there is a nuclear power plant on the front line in one country and on the front line in the other, does that in any way give you an opportunity for potentially some diplomacy with both sides?
Well, I would say the similarities of the situation, it is tempting to draw this kind of parallel, but the situations, as you rightly said, are very different. In one case, we have territorial issues, we had an occupation, we have a situation which is very different from here, Kursk, where we have a plant which is in controlled and disputed territory of the Russian Federation, which lies close to an advance of military troops from the other side. So if you want, the common denominator is the nuclear risk, or the risk of a nuclear accident, to put it correctly. Diplomacy is always deployed, and this is why, as you know, because we have been talking before, the IEA is the only international agency talking to both at the same time, because there is an obvious recognition from both sides of the importance. These are two very important nuclear countries, nuclear in the sense of nuclear energy, civilian nuclear energy. Of course, Russia has nuclear weapons and Ukraine does not. But there are countries that rely heavily on the contribution of nuclear energy to the national respective grids. So, of course, this makes it for repeated opportunities to talk, to persuade, to hopefully influence things for the better.
Great to speak to you again. Director General Grossi, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.